Imagine standing in a place where you are physically closer to London, England, than you are to Vancouver, British Columbia, in your own country. Now imagine taking a day trip to France. Welcome to Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada's most bizarre province. Why are Labrador and Newfoundland one province? A quick glance at a map raises an immediate geographic question. Why is the massive mainland territory of Labrador grouped with the island of Newfoundland as a single political province? The two landmasses are physically torn apart by the Strait of Belle Isle, a treacherous iceberg-choked waterway. The answer lies in the historic exploitation of physical geography. Centuries ago, the waters off the coast of Labrador contained some of the most lucrative and dense fishing and whaling grounds on the planet. British colonial governors stationed on the island of Newfoundland realized they needed legal jurisdiction over the mainland coast to control and tax these wealthy fisheries. Eventually, this marine border was formalized, forever binding Labrador to Newfoundland simply because of the economic power of the ocean. The tablelands. Walking on the Earth's skeleton. Imagine walking on the exposed innards of the Earth. In Groesmoor National Park, a jarring geographic anomaly known as the tablelands breaks up the lush green landscape, allowing you to basically walk on the skeleton of the planet. Hundreds of millions of years ago, a massive tectonic collision between ancient continents forced the Earth's mantle, the layer usually hidden deep beneath the crust, upward and onto the surface. Because this rock is rich in heavy metals like iron and completely devoid of the nutrients required to sustain most plant life, it remains barren. As the iron oxidizes in the air, it turns a striking rusty orange color. The result is a bizarre, toxic, and utterly fascinating alien landscape that looks like a piece of Mars dropped right onto the Canadian coast. Torngat Mountains, the place of spirits. Stretching along the remote northern tip of Labrador, the Torngat Mountains represent some of the most dramatic, untouched physical geography on the North American continent. Carved over millions of years by massive glaciers, the landscape is defined by deep, sheer-walled ocean fjords that cut sharply into mountains towering over 3,000 feet high. The name itself comes from the Inuktitut word Torngait, meaning place of spirits, which perfectly captures the haunting, isolated beauty of the region. Because this area represents a huge geographic intersection between the Arctic and the boreal forests, it hosts an incredible array of wildlife. Notably, the Torngats are home to a distinct population of polar bears that hunt, den, and survive entirely within this mountainous fjord-laced ecosystem. Mistastin Crater, NASA's lunar training ground. Hidden deep within the sprawling, unpopulated wilderness of northern Labrador lies Mistastin Crater, known to the Innu as Camastin. Roughly 36 million years ago, a huge meteorite crashed into the Earth, leaving behind an impact crater that spans an impressive 28 kilometers across and now houses a huge lake. What makes this geographic site truly incredible is not just its violent origin, but the specific type of rock the impact excavated. The incredible heat and pressure of the meteorite strike melted and exposed a rare mineral called anorthosite. Because this same type of anorthosite rock is highly prevalent on the surface of the Moon, specifically in the lunar highlands NASA and Canadian Space Agency, scientists and astronauts frequently use the harsh, isolated terrain of the Mistastin Crater as a training ground to prepare for actual lunar exploration mission. Newfoundland, the snake-free island. If you have an intense fear of snakes, the island of Newfoundland might just be your perfect geographic destination. Despite being a massive, heavily forested land mass full of bogs, lakes, and abundant wildlife, the island is entirely devoid of native snakes. During the last ice age, the entirety of Newfoundland was smothered beneath a massive, lifeless sheet of ice. When the glaciers finally retreated around 10,000 years ago, the sea levels rose, physically separating Newfoundland from the mainland before slow-moving reptiles could ever migrate across. Because of this impassable ocean barrier, snakes were permanently shut out. In fact, Newfoundland lacks several common North American animals for this exact same geographic reason, meaning you'll never encounter a skunk, porcupine, groundhog, or raccoon on the island. L'Anse aux Meadows, 500 years before Columbus. More than 5 centuries before Christopher Columbus ever set sail, a crew of Norse explorers successfully navigated the treacherous North Atlantic to set foot on North American soil. At the extreme northern tip of Newfoundland lies L'Anse aux Meadows, a sweeping coastal plain that fundamentally rewrote human history. Discovered by archaeologists in the 1960s, this site contains the undeniable remains of an 11th century Viking settlement, complete with timber-framed turf buildings identical to those found in Greenland and Iceland. The discovery of iron slag, a bronze fastening pin, and woodworking debris conclusively proved that Leif Erikson and his crew established a base camp here around the year 1000 CE, proving once and for all that Columbus was not the first European to see the Americas. L'Anse aux Meadows, North America's oldest burial mound. Long before the ancient Egyptians stacked the first stones of the pyramids, early indigenous peoples were building monumental structures on the rocky coast of southern Labrador. Located at the L'Anse aux Meadows National Historic Site, archaeologists uncovered an incredibly complex burial mound built by the maritime archaic people. Radiocarbon dating revealed that this site was constructed an astonishing 7,500 years ago, making it the oldest known burial mound in all of North America. The grave contains the remains of a young boy who was carefully buried face down and surrounded by fascinating artifacts, including a walrus tusk, harpoon heads, and bone flutes. The sheer age and geographic placement proves that highly sophisticated seafaring cultures thrived in the harsh subarctic environment of Labrador millennia before previously believed. Red Bay, the world capital of whale oil. During the mid-16th century, the frigid waters off the coast of Red Bay, Labrador, became the epicenter of a massive, booming global industry. Basque mariners, sailing all the way from the coasts of Spain and France, established a vast whaling station in this naturally protected harbour. Drawn by the dense migration of right and bowhead whales, thousands of men worked out of Red Bay to slaughter the huge mammals and render their blubber into oil. This whale oil was highly prized and shipped back across the Atlantic to light the street lamps and homes of Renaissance Europe. Red Bay operated as the world's premier industrial whale oil capital for decades, until the whale populations were eventually depleted. To this day, the bowhead whale population has yet to fully recover. Captain James Cook's Newfoundland mapping. Before he became world famous for his voyages to the Pacific Ocean, legendary explorer Captain James Cook spent 5 years in the 1760s painstakingly mapping the incredibly jagged, convoluted physical geography of Newfoundland. Following the 7 Years' War, the British Navy desperately needed an accurate chart of their newly secured fog-covered territory to protect their lucrative fisheries. Cook navigated the treacherous rocky coves and deep bays of the island, producing the first large-scale, scientifically accurate maps of Newfoundland's coastline. His cartography was so highly detailed and mathematically precise that his charts of the island were still being used by sailors well into the 20th century. This massive geographic undertaking not only secured British naval dominance in the North Atlantic, but also served as the ultimate proving ground for Cook, earning him the command of the Endeavour and launching his legendary global expeditions in the Southern Hemisphere. Signal Hill, the birth of modern communication. The modern age of global telecommunications traces its roots directly to the rugged, windswept geography of St. John's, Newfoundland. At the dawn of the 20th century, scientists believed that radio waves travelled in straight lines and would simply shoot off into space if fired across the curved surface of the Earth. Guglielmo Marconi sought to prove them wrong. Because Newfoundland is the most easterly point in North America, Marconi set up his receiving equipment on the appropriately named Signal Hill to minimise the distance across the Atlantic. On the 12th of December 1901, fighting through howling winds and using a kite to hoist his antenna, Marconi successfully received a Morse code transmission of the letter S sent from Cornwall, England, over 3,500 kilometres away. This proved that radio waves could follow the curvature of the Earth, ushering in the modern age of communication. The population imbalance. When looking at the mainland territory of Labrador is absolutely massive, accounting for a staggering 71% of the province's total geographic area. Yet, despite its colossal size, it houses less than 6% of the province's total population. Most of these residents are clustered into small, isolated coastal communities or mining towns, leaving the interior almost entirely devoid of human infrastructure. This extreme demographic imbalance makes Labrador one of the most untouched, pristine wilderness environments left on the planet. Its geography is dominated by endless boreal forests, untamed rivers, and silent tundra rather than roads or cities. The Labrador-Quebec border dispute. Political borders are usually pretty solid, but the border dividing the Labrador Peninsula from the province of Quebec remains oddly unsettled. The boundary was officially drawn in 1927 by the British Privy Council in London. They decided the border should follow the Atlantic watershed, meaning any land where water flows east into the Atlantic Ocean belongs to Labrador, while water flowing west goes to Quebec. However, the government of Quebec felt deeply slighted by this ruling, arguing it unfairly stripped them of massive swaths of resource-rich territory. Because Quebec never officially consented to this line, the border is still considered technically disputed by the province today. If you look at official maps produced by the Quebec government, the eastern border of Labrador is frequently marked as undefined or actively contested. Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, France in North America. You don't need to cross the Atlantic Ocean to visit France. You only need to travel about 25 kilometers off the southern coast of Newfoundland. Here lies the archipelago of Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, a geographic anomaly that serves as the last remaining vestige of the once massive French colonial empire in North America. Despite being almost fully surrounded by Canadian waters, this tiny cluster of islands is a self-governing overseas collectivity of France. If you take the short ferry ride over, you'll immediately step into European culture. The official language is French, the currency is the euro, the cars have European license plates, and the bakeries serve up authentic, freshly baked baguettes. Just don't expect to see the Eiffel Tower. London versus Vancouver, the distance illusion. Canada is a country defined by its staggering continent-spanning width. And nothing puts that immense geography into perspective quite like the positioning of Newfoundland. Because the island juts so far east into the Atlantic Ocean, its geographic relationship with the rest of the world is completely warped. For example, if you stand at Cape Spear near the provincial capital of St John's, you are geographically closer to London, England, than you are to Vancouver, British Columbia. The extreme eastern projection of the island means that flights from Newfoundland to Western Europe are often shorter than flights to the Pacific coast of its own country. This geographic reality has deeply influenced the province's culture, trade, and of course, history. St John's, the windiest city in North America. Newfoundland has a reputation for wild, unpredictable weather, and its physical positioning on the globe is the exact reason why. The island acts as a massive rock thrust directly into the volatile winds of the North Atlantic. Because of its unique geographic position at the confluence of several ocean currents and the jet stream, while also being an island, Newfoundland is continuously slammed by powerful uninterrupted windstorms. This atmospheric reality officially makes the capital city of St John's the windiest city in Canada. While this historically made life incredibly harsh for early settlers and fishermen, this human geography is rapidly shifting. Today, Newfoundland is recognized as having some of the most consistent, powerful onshore wind resources on Earth, perfectly positioning the province to transition from offshore oil production into a modern global superpower of green wind energy. Conclusion: Newfoundland and Labrador is perhaps Canada's most fascinating province. For one, its dual nature as equal parts island and mainland challenges traditional ideas around what a province actually is. But also, it's just so far away from everything else in Canada that it feels like it almost could be its own country. If you enjoyed learning about Newfoundland and Labrador, be sure to check out the video about the Midwest of the United States. Thanks for watching. See you next time.